And so our next session is going to be about programming basics. So this will be an introduction to the first LEGO League of Programming. And for this session, I would like to invite back Jane Taylor and introduce Dr. D. Wallace. Dr. Wallace is the first senior mentor for the East region of Texas, so the Houston area as well. And she has been involved with robotics since 1999 and joined the first community in 2003. She is a certified science teacher and has a PhD in post-secondary adult education.
Hello.
So, welcome. Dee, you're still on mute. If you could unmute yourself. Thank you. All right, so I will let you all jump into this if you're ready to go.
Absolutely. Thank you, Kelly, for the introduction. And I'm going to be working with the fabulous Jane Taylor. Here in Houston, we call her the H-Town Robot Diva. And we are going to be covering 3 steps for starting a coding team. And those 3 steps include picking a learning goal, picking a robot, and picking a language. So I'm going to yield the first part of this to the Diva.
First of all, everybody, thank you for, I want to really thank First in Texas and Kelly and the full marketing team for even putting this together, because this is a great opportunity for us to connect with our first LEGO League community and actually kind of answer some of your concerns. This session is about basic programming, but we do understand that in the times that we're currently in, and considering that you are going to be in a classroom setting with your students, or even in a wherever you're meeting with the students, that there are going to be limitations into what that learning can look like, especially when it comes to the robot and moving it around and being able to touch some of the same things. But one of the areas that we thought would be a powerful place to focus your your first LEGO League robot experience, because regardless of if you're in a remote environment where your students are not in the same room and they have to collaborate, or if you're in a classroom environment and you can't all touch the robot, you can ensure that everybody has a general understanding of coding. And that's from, in some of the other sessions, talked about students who may not be the talkers and want to be involved in the presentation. Well, you know what's also true? Some students came to present and they may not be as interested on the robot side, but this is a way that coding is a way that you can get everybody engaged, because everybody wants to see the robot move. So we're gonna kind of bounce through those 3 ideas, still dealing with the basics of coding and comparing both the EV3 robot with the SPIKE Prime, but we also want to make sure that we keep it wide enough that we can cover some of the pains you may be having. So I like to start off by saying that regardless of the times we're in, you still have your 2 pieces that make you, as your superpower, which is your passion and your love for first and why you're doing this. And I think that as long as you keep that, regardless of how you present to the students, that they're going to be able to receive and keep the momentum they need for this season, whether it's their first season, or this is whatever season for them. All right, so Dee, why don't we start off with you kind of talking about how picking learning goals and why that has anything to do with basic programming.
Absolutely. And so one of the things that was covered in some of the early sessions was talking about the guides that come with the challenge set. Now, some of you have indicated that you've already received your challenge set. Because the game has not officially been released, that's why you have not received your guides. After the game is released, then the guides and the challenge set are both shipped together. And so what happens is that you will get a team guide, which is for the adult coach or the mentor, and then you will get an engineering notebook. So one team, as far as first is considered, consists of 10 students. So you will get 10 engineering notebooks, and you will get 2 team guides. And that's because you're supposed to have 2 people who are registered and passed background who can have the team guide. The team guide is so very important, even though since 1999. I still use the team guides last year since it was the first year in coming out. One of the best things that I liked is that it showed you how to go in, how to download the program, and then it also gave you specific instructions for the EV3 on how to go and find lessons for the students to program. Now, I know one of the things that Joe had said before and Jane had mentioned before, yes, I am that old. So this is the first actual robot, Lego robot that came out. This is what's called the RCX. And so it's been mentioned several times. Yeah, I'm that old. And the next generation of robot was called the NXT, which NXT really stood for next, the next generation. And then our third robot, of course, was the EV3, which was Evolution 3. And so those are the three robots that generation of robots that we had with Lego. But of course, only the NXT and EV3 are of those two that I showed that can be used. But it does give you very specific instructions on where to go. As a classroom teacher, I would have loved to have had this. I was just given a whole bunch of Legos and that RCX and told, go for it. And
So when you're thinking about learning goals for your team, one of the things you want to think about, what resources do you have in front of you first. So if you are going to be using the EV3 like Dee is talking about, there are books from last season that are going to be very detailed. I can't tell you what this year. I know for sure the SPIKE Prime will be. It's detailed as you see with D. I'm not sure that will be true for the EV3, but do know last season is still available, meaning that you still need to go forward, you still need to turn. So those resources, that's what I love about First Lego League, are still just as valuable in the upcoming season. So the learning goal sets the pace of how you're going to teach coding.
Absolutely, absolutely, Jane. And the guys that I'm showing you, they're not this year's model. They are the ones from last year. Also, what I love about the learning goals is that for a classroom teacher or even an out of school time person, it does give you specific objectives for each of the missions to be able to do. It gives you just some continuity for your kids to be able to know exactly where they're going and where they're going to end up. One of the things that I loved also about the guides is that it really focuses in on um, the the core values. And in each one of the learning session, the core values are mentioned and the kids have to participate in the core values. So as the judges were talking about previously, this isn't something that they just learn. These are core values that they're actually doing as they're going through their missions. One of the things that I also wanted to mention when we talked about team size, yes, we kind of have some ideal, sizes, but if you do have a group of students where you have a group of 10 students, it does specifically tell you how to break the students out into groups and then they can, you know.
Right. And so when you're trying to decide what type of coding you're going to be doing, what kind of programming you want to have for your robot, I know that you're thinking, why are we not talking about pick the language or saying pick the robot? Why is that not the focus? It's because I think that's the biggest mistake that a lot of teams make. They start with they start with the end of the competition in mind and not what are my kids going to do in this continuum? Because you remember, first is a continuum of programs. We are preparing these students to go to FTC. So when I think about coding and I think about programming, then I'm going to think about that. So what are the resources you're going to have in front of you that allow for you to actually teach something? So picking a learning goal, whether you're teaching computational thinking, meaning, oh, my students are going to know how to, look at a problem, break it down, and then solve their robot solution that way. Or if you're like, okay, I'm literally just going to teach that this little round one is the cap. Like, I'm gonna teach pictures, and they're gonna understand when they look at this how to stack a code in Scratch, or you have to know what you're teaching. So that's the first point, is know what you're teaching, be familiar with the resources like the books and the guides that help the process of teaching easier, because you can use tutorials, you can use the books and taking notes and documentation. And once you use these resources and you're not trying to figure that out, then you can actually teach something. And when your students have a successful experience with first Lego League, they want to come back because they're like, what am I going to learn the next year? And it's not about just how do we finish in the competition. It's, oh, what do we learn this year that I'm going to be in my second year? In your second year, you learn this, you know, or whatever. So understanding where that learning is coming from. Okay, let's go.
Absolutely. Just one last thing, Jane, before we move on. And it's so very important for that child to actually have something in their hand. And so for each child to have that in their hand and knowing where they're going and what they're learned and being able to show someone, you know, what they did throughout the year.
Right. And then so the guys do kind of make this a little bit more COVID proof, in that the fact that you can connect the students to the guide and everybody can engage in the coding. All right, so let's move to the second part, which is understanding picking a robot. So I asked you to come up with your 5 reasons for why EV3, 5 or so reasons for why EV3 is the robot for First Lego League, and then I'm gonna give mine for why SPIKE is the robot.
Okay. One of the reasons I think that EV3 is the robot is because you mentioned about the learning continuum. One of the things that you have to realize with the challenge is that a child could come in at 4th grade. And so you're going to have them there 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, and they're going to be on that one robot. What I like about the EV3 is that I could be the second robot in that learning continuum. So even if a teacher had picked SPIKE for the 4th and 5th grade, then I can come in with a different robot, which would continue the learning, which would continue the passion, which would continue them to want to be a part of this.
Also, so you would put
also,
EV3 after the SPIKE. So
I would put EV3 after the SPIKE. And that's
okay,
because, see, because I would say SPIKE, Scratch, I would say SPIKE, Python, then I would switch to EV3, which the language for EV3 is called EV3G. And then I would go on for 7th and 8th grade if you wanted to keep them in that long, for changing over into SPIKE. Changing over into Python. So that way you have a continuum of robots and languages that you can keep the love for learning. Also, as Joe mentioned before, is that you have multiple options for sensors. I like it also because you can bring the sensors and the motors from NXT up to EV3. So that's just another way of using them. Now, what I'm going to say, what I like better are the wheels. Someone had mentioned.
No, you can't be on your robot side. You have to stay on your robot side.
Okay, I'll stay on my robot side, and so those are my reasons for EV3.
No, you missed your most important reason that makes you possibly get the wheel.
No, I'm gonna use that for the other one. I'm gonna use that.
Oh, you're not selling it yet. Oh, you're holding that. Okay, because I was like, that's really
secrets.
Your robot can beat my robot out. Okay, so some of the reasons why I picked SPIKE, and I decided to take off the hat of if you're a new team or experienced teams. We have a lot of experienced teams that are interested in moving up, and they're like, oh, but the EV3 is going to be like like maybe a learning a step back. But no, I disagree. I think that with the definitely because it's Scratch, I believe that not only does it lend itself very well to people learning it very quick, I'm thinking COVID proof and everything about how can we, regardless of our environment, keep our First Legos teams learning. One of the things you can do is that with code.org, you have Scratch 2.0. and you have Tutors for Scratch 3.0. So if you're trying to connect with your students and keep your team together, you can still be talking FLL coding and teaching them the structure and the function of this very industry friendly language. And with the SPIKE, if you are in a classroom learning environment where you can't touch the robots, those tablets, guess what? They can connect to that hub from different spaces. You know, you are able to view it, you disconnect, it's a Bluetooth connection. So when I think about, like, if I, you know, some of those connections are not as fluid when you come to the EV3, you know, because it's not as, the technology is not as new. Some of my other favorite things is that those input and output ports on the hub for the SPIKE, because a lot of students do get all frazzled and dazzled over input ports. And let me remember that there are some new learners on here. So when I say input ports and output ports, what I'm talking about is they're on the EV3D's robot that she's representing. You need to learn where to plug your sensors versus where do I plug my motors, right? Coaches, you know, that's our favorite troubleshooting thing. I mean, even in the software, putting a caution sign saying, dun, 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 you have a problem, that students still have issues with that. With this robot, it will put the caution sign, but it also will troubleshoot and help you be successful by fixing it and just kind of warning you, hey, actually, you know, and then also alerting you in the code. So, yeah, so I believe that it's more, you know, when it comes to wanting your kids to do really high-tech things, the motor extensions, ooh, those are great. And what I'm, so remembering that I have new people on here, with the EV3, it was a smart motor. Very smart motor, right, Dee? You can tell it a lot of information, how many rotations, how much power, you know, just everything you wanted to tell that motor. But you know what that motor didn't have? These two little dots on it. Oh, I wish I had the SPIKE in front of me with the two little dots. If Joe comes back on, Joe, you show those two little dots. And they seem like the most simple thing, but they're actually recalibrating that robot and giving you a visual, recalibrating that motor and giving you a visual of where does that rotation start. And when I tell you, teachers, I'm always going to be a science teacher. Y'all can't stop me. That's exciting to me. 360 degrees makes one rotation. Like, that's what it is. That's what the coding is about for me. All right, so the last part of our conversation, Dee, before, so we can leave at least a few minutes for questions, is laptop versus language. Picking a language, laptop versus tablet, really quickly.
Okay, so really quickly with the EV3, you do have an option between using a laptop or using the tablet. As the teacher, you always need to have a laptop version of the EV3 software. And that's because any updates that you need to do to the robot, you have to do it through a laptop version. So even if you have Chromebooks, if you have iPads, as a teacher, you need to have a laptop version of the software. Understanding that the tablet version or the Chromebook version is just an app. And so it's not going to have all the complexity that is needed for you to do some advanced level, make my block, type of programming. But one of the things I do want to say, and this kind of goes back to what, Beth said earlier about being involved as a teacher, you got to give that over to the student. You have to be there as a facilitator and not as the person who's actually doing the program for it. And Jane, we done seen some instances where the kids come to the competition and all they know how to do is really take it to the table and push the button. And the teacher has done all of the programming for the students. It's so very important for you to go in and to teach them how to use that information. And so my favorite thing with the EV3 robot doesn't even have to do with the laptop or the the computer. It actually has to do with the on-brick programming. On-brick programming, I feel, is the very first thing that you should be using with your students in teaching them how to use the EV3, because it actually teaches you about the flow. It helps the students to understand how the flow of the program actually works. It helps them to understand, well, why when they have problems, why those problems are occurring. And then also, if all else fails, if you come to school and there is no electricity, if the books won't connect, you can always still do lessons with your robot. We've seen it in competition where the laptop is locked up because it has some kind of coding from the school, and students have still been able to go and participate in the competition because they know how to use that EV3 on brick programming. So that is actually my
Well, that to me is probably the most advantage that you have but isn't your screen kind of dark though? Because the Spike has bright coloring, and so it's gonna make it so easy when the kids are going and it's time to load the code and try to get going. All that punching through and going through all of that, yeah, we don't have to do that because it's so much easier to get to those codes. And I mean, it's just so much prettier, and like the interactivity of it, and just the, I'll say, expression. You can express with this one, whether it's the facial, I mean, the different dots you can make and how you can make it unique or whatever. So, but at the end, before we bring our wonderful Kelly back on, I wanted to make sure that I touch on, lastly, the thing about the Spike that once again that I like is that it does have that easy startup, but Dee and I both have always agreed that, you know, you really can you need 2 robots in the space and 2 languages if you have a group of kids who are more than 3 grade levels. So if you're having 4th through 6th graders, that team should have 2 robots and two types of robots and 2 languages. So we agree. That's one of the things that we always try to do when we were creating, whether it's a you know, group or a team or whatever, just our class, just kind of offering that diversity. All right, so that's
but Jane, just like an iPhone 10 and iPhone 11, they both still work correctly?
Yeah, they do, and they both have a lot of the same.
All right, so you know,
all
we
right,
just have to come
we're
to the
gonna
end.
agree that, you know, just Lego robots are the bomb, and with First Lego League, you really can't go wrong with either of them. Just make sure you know what you're going to be teaching first before you pick it. Make sure you know what resources you have in front of you. What do you have? Laptops? Do you have tablets? And then also decide, what was my third one, Dee? And whatever that third one was, y'all. Then, all right, Kelly, we're done.
I won.
The chat says I won. Okay.
No.
I do agree with the comment of, I wish all Zoom calls could be this much fun. So that was great. That was so helpful. Thank you so much. That was a really good rundown. And yeah, like really helping these coaches when they feel intimidated. I know when I first started First Lego League, no science background, and like sitting down and learning the resources, figuring out there's so many resources and so many different ways to do it was really beneficial. And then you can move forward with learning, and then, yeah, let the kids take it away.
Absolutely, Kelly. And we want everybody to know that this is just a taste and see of what we're going to do. And we're going to have more in-depth workshops that are going to come back. And I guess me and Jane will fight on the next one when we Yes.
It's not fighting if I always win. So. Kelly?
Yes, no. Yeah, so we will have more, our next virtual conference will definitely have more in-depth programming, because we need the 2 of you back. We need to get more people involved. So It's not just the 2 of you. We'll get some more arguments in there. We'll get Joe to come back, and we need some people from throughout the entire state. So we'll get into this. So thank you all so much.
You're welcome.
And did we have any questions? Were there any specific questions about about coding, I know with one of the things I did see in the chat was about there being some new people and just feeling like maybe we're talking pretty big about things. So
Yeah.
I don't want to leave this session without reminding them that honestly, the best resource for understanding what to expect for coding is to visit the FIRST website, firstinspire.org, and go to the resources. They have some really good, even though you can't see the full pullout, it's August the 2nd, right? Isn't this the 2nd? We got like, well, no, it's the 1st.
Oh, it's the 1st.
We have 3 days, y'all. Y'all can wait 3 days to be able to open it up fully. And the question was, are the guides available virtually? Digitally? Last year at the end of the season, they did make it available. So I can't confirm, yet where, I don't know if you know, Kelly, if they will be available in a digital form from the beginning, but they didn't. It was pretty deep into the season before they released it digitally.
I would say it's probably going to be something like that again. I wouldn't expect it to be released, but you should be able to find bits and pieces, especially the robot game rules and the field setup guides. All of that will be available separately. And of course, the instructions, the build instructions are all separate from those guides. So, and you can still find plenty of resources.
And also don't forget to go to the LEGO education website.
Yes.
To be able to find additional resources for SPIKE and EV3. Also, I wanted to mention something. I know Joe had talked about it when in building the robot and talking about the 2 different versions, the retail version versus the educational version. And to my understanding, the retail version isn't going to be sold on anymore. But you can still find it. The thing is that it does not come with a rechargeable battery, and it does not come with a ultrasonic sensor. It comes with an infrared sensor. So,
and I'm glad you brought that up, because this is one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen made, which is in this topic frame, is that when you are looking for the software for your EV3 robot, that you tend to run into the retail version of the software. Well, if what you want is the LEGO education software. So be very specific when you're looking to download, because both of the softwares are free. The retail, and it has a blue background. That's not the one that's not the one that will include tutorials to support your team. Right. Can you code in it? Absolutely. But it will not support learning objectives where you can set your students off to learn on their own. You'll have to, kind of decode it all. But if you use the LEGO Education EV3, then, which is also a free download, then you will be able to, go ahead and get those tutorials, as well as other resources that will be pointed to from the First LEGO League resources. And yes, the infrared is not allowed in the in First LEGO League. Is not allowed at all. So yeah,
and that was one of the clarifications I wanted, because someone had mentioned in the chat that all LEGO branded products can be used, and not all LEGO products can be used, but that information will be given to you inside of the guides that you have as to what can and cannot be used for this season.
That is correct. And when you are at competitions, the Bluetooth must be turned off.
Must be turned off.
And that, trust me, that protects your robot from accidentally getting deleted, things like that. So make sure before you get to the competition, your Bluetooth is turned off and you don't turn it on the entire time you're there.
And just going back with that, Kelly, and that would be one of the great reasons that why you would want to have your students practice with the download cable instead of practicing with the Bluetooth, because in addition to being a LEGO person, I'm also a track and field official, and the way you practice is the way you're going to perform. And so you have to make sure that your students are practicing the same way that they perform.
I did get corrected. You can use Bluetooth in the pits, but I still wouldn't recommend it for the reason I said. But you can use it in the pits. But I would bring a cord if I was a coach. I would make sure my team members have a cord.
And I would make sure they know how to do it, like Dee said.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, because in North Texas, coaches are not allowed to touch the robots, and they're not allowed to touch the laptops. They're not allowed to touch the cords. They're not even allowed to look like they're going to.
In past seasons. And we'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. I really appreciate you being here and with us today. Really appreciate it. So thank you again so much.
Thank you.